Left of the box. Had a viewer asking me about if there's really a point in voting if you're in a very blue area. So, Jeff, to help you out, blue in Canada is conservative, red is liberal.
Oh, okay. That threw me off a little bit, but okay.
Yeah.
Continue.
As somebody who was working on Rebel HQ for quite some time, trying to keep those two straight and being dyslexic, not the easiest thing. So in Canada, we want the red wave, which just sounds very menstrual. So, but the liberals, so basically the liberals in Canada are kind of like your establishment Democrats, very corporate neoliberal. The NDP is like the squad where you have some that are actually really good and progressive, but others that have also kind of started to fall in line with the Democrats, the corporate Democrats. And then the conservatives are like the Republicans and are going pretty much, there are some branches that are just extreme as some of the Republicans. It's just we have better protections here in Canada. So it's going to be a
Okay.
lot more difficult for them to do what they're doing in the States. It's not impossible, but it's a hell of a lot more difficult. So the question from the viewers, somebody who lives in a very blue area, and we have the first past the post here, so it's just the person with the polarity that gets the seat and all of that sort of stuff. And if you know that you're going to be in a very blue area, then what's the point of even going out and voting? And so I let you know ahead of time that this was going to come up. Did you have any thoughts on if you should vote, even though you know your vote won't matter for who wins the seat?
Well, yeah, when you first presented this to me, the first thing I thought was, well, what if there's a lot of people like you who felt the exact same way? And what I'm about to say could lend itself to like communicating more and networking, sure. But if there's a number of people, dozens of people, maybe hundreds of people who feel the same way you do, and all of them feel the same way you do, which leads to inaction as far as voting, then yeah, the election is going to go the way you think, especially in that area. And so, me, I'm in Ohio right now, and people may be under the impression that Ohio is purple when in reality it's red, Republican here. And we are just trying, literally right now, trying to get over a very much gerrymandered map, which lends itself to Republicans. At the same time, Republican legislature here in Ohio was trying to pass some laws regarding recreational marijuana and abortion rights, and they tried to do it in a very janky way. Had all of us assumed or thought that the elections were going to go a certain way because honestly, it's technically rigged, or they were trying to rig it one way or another, then things wouldn't have gone the way they did. Which, by the way, both of those things went the way of leftist viewpoint when it comes to recreational marijuana and abortion access. So, yeah, if all of us thought that way, then the very thing that we would have been afraid of would have happened. So, I would encourage that individual to not think of it as an individual, but maybe as a group. Um, Sometimes you just never know. And so, um, again, that would lend itself to more communication and networking. So, if that individual can find others like them, then do some damage, create a havoc, go out and do your civic duty
Mhm.
because others will. Um, so, that is my piece on this whole thing. I feel like um, I don't want this individual to give up, is I guess the point. Even if it does not seem to be in their favor.
Okay. Sorry, I just caught a comment from Bad Ash 29. If we ever have a block government, I vote we call it the blockage. So we have the Bloc Québécois. It's a federal party in Quebec that is, its origin was separatist, and it's not so much separatist now. It's a funny thought that that's what we could call it, but they can never have power because they can never win enough seats because they only exist within Quebec, and you need a certain amount of seats in order to win a majority in the government. And so They will never get to be the majority, although one time they were the opposition. So my answer to this, it's a bit longer and detailed and stuff, and I like to use Ontario as the example, because here in Ontario, Doug Ford, despite all of the horrible, horrible stuff he's done, got reelected with only 18% of possible votes.
Mm.
So we had such a low voter turnout that when you did the math, so it was something under 50% of the people who voted. But when you did the math to all the people who could potentially vote, it was only 18% of possible voters. And he got in and has a majority with that. And part of it is the apathy that, as you were mentioning, if everyone kind of thinks that their vote doesn't matter and there's no point in going out, then we get a lot of people who don't do it. When if everyone actually went out and voted their convictions, things would look a lot different. If they actually thought their vote mattered, but it benefits the establishment to convince people it doesn't.
Yes.
Because it's not just the conservatives. The liberals also do this because it benefits the liberals too to, say your vote doesn't matter. And that helps actually keep the NDP in fewer ridings and stuff. And the liberals are always very quick to say, don't split your vote when it comes to certain ridings. Because here, because we have the multi-party system. So if you have one conservative running and you have the liberals and the NDP, and then the people on the left are splitting their votes between the liberals and the NDP, then the conservative is going to win based on the polarity. So, but what the liberals tend to not say is don't split the vote. So you better vote NDP in these certain ridings because the NDP has a better chance of winning. They'll never do it the other way. So this to me, there's a lot of different things. So you have areas where it could flip. So the margin between the left and the right is very narrow. So then, of course, it's very important to go out and vote because you want to hopefully flip that area into being liberal or NDP. So in those instances, even if you're in a blue area, it's good to come out because, again, if everyone who actually came out and voted their convictions, then there's a high probability that people in this country are more left of center than they are center or right of center. And I think it's very much the same in the States when you think about it. The policies that we want in place. I'm not necessarily talking about social issues, but when it comes to the policies put in place, both our countries are left of center when it comes to housing, affordability, social care, health care, things of that sort. For the ridings that are very heavy blue here, so the vast majority of them are blue, would it matter then if you go out and vote? Because then even if everyone in that riding who is liberal and NDP all decided to get behind one of those candidates and votes, they still wouldn't beat the blue. Is there a point? And the answer is still yes.
Absolutely, yes.
And part of the reason is you can start to see trends because it's all documented, how big the margins are. And so you can start to see if that margin starts to narrow, then that means that the party will notice eventually and actually maybe put more resources into it in that area to help increase the chances of making that margin narrow even more and get the momentum going. But it also lets other people in that riding know they're not alone. If you have more people come out and vote NDP per se, let's say, then you can see, well, okay, you can get the numbers. You can actually say, okay, there are 5,000 other people in my riding that vote this way. Where are they and what can we do? And then you can start to, get involved in the community, start networking with each other, start building momentum, start joining campaigns and do the door knocking and things of that sort. Even like I have severe issues with the NDP in this area, just given my personal history with that party. But I'd still much rather see them in power than the liberals or the conservatives. So it's important just to let people know that they're not alone, but to also see where the trends go, because eventually the trends can change. Just because it's always been blue doesn't mean it's going to stay that way. And when other people start to see that margin narrow, then that actually helps to build the momentum and get more people involved and more people excited and more people in the game, the political game. So on all levels, if you know you're going to win, you vote because you want to make sure you win. If there's a chance of flipping, you want to vote because you want to help that chance to flip. If there's no chance of your party winning, you still want to vote because you want to let people know that there's other people in your community that vote the same way. And you want to see over time if that margin starts to narrow. And that only happens if people go out and vote.
I don't, it's not this simple, but if the amount of people who didn't vote represented like a presidential candidate here in America, that individual would win every presidential election every time.
Yeah.
So that's how strong it is to where it's like apathy. And honestly, it might get worse this
Mm-hmm.
year. Hopefully not, but it might get worse.
Yeah.
So
Well,
yes.
it's the same here. Because less than half the I think it was actually shockingly low. Like only 30% of possible voters went out and voted in Ontario this past election. Like just less than half the population went out. And it's getting really bad with the apathy. But if everyone actually went out and voted their convictions, we'd have, a parliament that looks a lot different than what it is. But we run into the problem here in Canada where there's not that much difference between the Liberals and the Conservatives. It's just the Conservatives, generally speaking, are just worse. They're worse on everything. And they are moving further right in their rhetoric and what they want to do, because now we have Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the federal Conservatives, who wants to start implementing his anti-trans agenda. But like Justin Trudeau with his renters' bills of rights on the federal level, you can't necessarily do that. You can't necessarily get away with it. But the rhetoric matters because it stokes up the base and, will increase the hatred towards LGBTQ plus folks. But his ability to actually make that legislation happen is it's not good, just given the powers between the federal and the provincial governments. And we'll get into that with the Renters' Bills of Rights. So that was basically, I think that's everything that I wanted to say about that. Because I always say it's
Well,
important to vote, but then I tend to forget to actually maybe break it down a little bit more as to why.
that's the thing. But my heart goes out to that person. If they
Mm-hmm.
feel hopeless or helpless in this situation, that sucks. That speaks to either a city or a municipality not
Mm-hmm.
representing them and feel like their voice can be heard. That is not a good feeling.
Oh, I feel it too. Like I am so frustrated with the party system here. Like I am so frustrated with how our government works. Like I feel it too. The thing is that the elections, they're just a tool. They're not the end all be all. It's the activism that ends up pushing the parties in the directions we want. Like it's people hitting the streets. It's people, you know, it, very little actually gets done through the government. And I can feel it too, because it's especially somebody who lives with disability and lives with poverty. The outlook is not good right now for what's happening in our government. But it is just a stop. Like it's just one thing in the toolbox. The there's a phrase in my head that I knew earlier when I was talking about this, but
No, I was gonna say, like, I know with you specifically, there is a great deal of policies that could be implemented where you are that would impact you personally. And so I would imagine every vote matters to you as well.
mm-hmm. What it comes down to is in Ontario, we got Doug Ford in power again. And I'm not exaggerating when I say there are going to be people who will not make it to the next election because of that decision, because
Mm.
of that, through the legislative poverty that people are in when they're living with disabilities, to the lack of health care that we're getting. You know, we have ERs being shut down, we have funding cuts happening constantly. Our healthcare system is just absolutely falling apart, and people are losing their lives because of it. And so there are absolutely people who would be alive had any other government got into power. And so that's part of the reason why I feel so passionately about it. But, you know, it's harm reduction. That's the word that I was looking for. The votes, the government that we get in, it's harm reduction. So you vote for the least worst option. And it's the work done on the ground the rest of the time that really gets it going. Also, very important that people don't tend to think of is to make sure you get involved on the municipal level, because municipal politics has a huge impact on people's daily lives, more so than they tend to think.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm glad this individual reached out to you and they can trust you to answer as best as possible, because you are definitely passionate about it.
Yeah, it is something that I completely feel, and there are times when even I kind of just want to say, fuck it, there's no point. But you got to stay at it. You got to keep in the fight. You got to keep going. You know, it's the harm reduction. It's reaching out to other people in your community with like minds and stuff. It's trying to just get the progressive message out there, the word out there. And it is so frustrating at times because it's never the whole 2 step forward, 1 step back that people like to think. It's more like we do 5 steps forwards and it's 4 steps back. And it usually happens in chunks. Yeah. So it can be so frustrating, but in the long term, it will, you know, we generally speaking as societies, we are starting to move more progressive than we were years and years ago in both the United States and in Canada. And it's just important that we keep on fighting, because the instant we don't is the instant we go to hands made tale, you know, because there are people on the right that will just take it away as fast as they possibly can if they're given the opportunity. So we got to make sure they don't get that opportunity.
Yeah, we got the same thing going on. Some places are better than others, but there's a lot on the line this year when it comes to local, state, and federal government elections. So again, whoever that person was, take advantage of the civic duty that you have and that was given to you.